I'm going to discuss in this video what is a lawful and unlawful freeze of congressionally authorized spending. Since starting his second term, Trump has been exercising clearly dictatorial powers by impounding funds and eliminating programs authorized by Congress through executive orders. Article 2 of the Constitution imposes a duty on the President to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. It is Congress, not the President, who has the constitutional power of the purse as provided in Article 1 of the Constitution. Trump has been freezing spending under congressionally authorized programs signed into law by prior presidents through executive orders that he issues. Freezing is equivalent to impounding the funds and effectively repealing laws by presidential executive orders. Much of that spending has been frozen by Musk and the Dodge Boys, implementing what they believe is covered by Trump's presidential edicts. In effect, Trump and Musk have usurped the power of Congress as provided in the Constitution to repeal laws and rescind funding that they do not like. There is a law called the Impoundment Control Act that provides a legal pathway for rescinding congressionally authorized spending, which is something that the Republicans and Trump are ignoring. Why are they ignoring that law? The Republicans in Congress do not want to vote on rescinding spending that Musk and Trump are terminating without congressional authorization. That would be used against many of them in campaign ads in the 2026 election. And there is nothing remotely conservative about the Republican position on executive authority to repeal unilaterally congressional funding and programs approved by Congress. But this is the antithesis of what is meant by conservatism in the American tradition. Trump's party is not conservative. I have discussed the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 in a prior YouTube video published a year or so ago, which I will link in the More section below. It was obvious to me now that Trump was going to ignore the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 and would be rescinding authorized spending by executive order. That act codifies the existing constitutional powers of Congress over spending as provided in the Constitution of the United States, and maybe the Republicans need to read Article 1. Under that act, which Trump has ignored, a president who wishes to rescind congressionally authorized spending has to identify the spending that will be reduced or eliminated, and then Congress has to vote on the president's proposals. They might agree with some of them or disagree with some of them. Is the president faithfully executing that law by refusing to submit a rescinding spending proposal to Congress? Yes, he is. He's violating the law, and he's doing so repeatedly over and over again, almost on a daily basis now. There are two reasons why the Republicans are ignoring this law and the congressional power over the purse and other powers provided or granted to Congress by Article 1 of the Constitution. The first is that the Republicans in the House and Senate do not want to vote on rescinding the spending that is now being rescinded by executive order or by the actions of Musk and his Dodge Boys in interpreting what is meant by an executive order, knowing that they would be hammered in campaign ads in 2028 and would likely lose control over the House at a minimum. They are just fine with Trump usurping their constitutional powers and duties by exercising authoritarian powers of a king, something that was thought to be undesirable in the United States by those who fought for America's independence, including some of my ancestors from England 250 years ago. The second reason is that Trump is an authoritarian demagogue and does not want any effective restraint on whatever whimsical or impulsive action that pops into his reptilian brain at a particular moment in time. He is daring the judicial branch to stop his usurpation of congressional constitutional powers and his refusal to follow the process for rescinding spending in the Impoundment Control Act. Another Republican president, Richard Nixon, was inclined to exercise authoritarian powers, but nowhere near the level of Trump. It was Nixon who said that when the president does something, it is legal, a mantra often repeated by Trump. The Impoundment Control Act was passed in response to Nixon impounding funds under the Water Pollution Control Act approved by Congress. Nixon had vetoed spending under that act, and then Congress overrode his veto with a strong bipartisan support. Nixon then, after having his veto overridden, impounded the funds nonetheless, authorized by Congress, which in effect reinstated his veto that had been overridden. The history is discussed in the unanimous Supreme Court decision in Trump v. New York, a decision proved by all the Republican appointed justices at the time. The opinion notes that Congress, quote, promptly overrode, end quote, Nixon's veto. No one should be surprised now by the Republican justices on the Supreme Court overruling the Train decision, since prior precedent, no matter how ancient it is, means absolutely nothing to them. So while the Republicans refusing to vote on the spending cuts as required by the Impoundment Control Act, there is no reason that expresses traditional American values or anything resembling conservatism in America, or at least American tradition. Once conservatism is defined as avoiding all cost a president exerting powers of a king. The judiciary is now dominated at the highest level by justices who, for the first time in U.S. history, are inclined to expand presidential powers into more of an imperial presidency resembling kingly-type powers. And that is supported, as long as the president is Trump, by close to 1/2 of the voting population. There's nothing remotely conservative in the American tradition about this approach. It is the antithesis of conservative values expressed in the Constitution and the entire reason for the Revolutionary War to begin with. The widespread support for a president exercising dictatorial powers is okay when the dictator wannabe is a Republican rather than a liberal Democrat. Maybe the Republicans who support what Trump is doing now in repealing spending authorized by Congress and eliminating entire programs and even agencies set up by Congress by executive order, that they may want to consider or think about for at least a minute or so what would happen if a liberal Democrat like Elizabeth Warren became president of the United States and then started to do the same. Maybe that president would just impound half of the defense spending. Who would stop them once the president is established that the president has that constitutional authority? The funds impounded in the future, once the authority is sanctioned by the judiciary, if that occurs, will depend on the ideology of the president, or probably something much worse, in my opinion. They're an impulsive and uninformed action made by a president based on their own reality creations, untethered from anything remotely resembling reality and fact-based decision making. I've cited some references in the more section below to what I've discussed in this video.